Move on to Middle East, another deadly day in Gaza as local health officials say 16 Palestinians were killed by Israeli strikes on Friday. Attacks targeted Jabalia, Tufa, and Khan Yunis, with witnesses reporting heavy air and ground strikes on Jabalia and Beit Hanun. The Israeli military issued a new evacuation order for northern Gaza, but has yet to comment on the reported casualties. The U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said it resumed aid delivery Friday, despite earlier announcing site closures for civilian safety after deadly shootings near Rafah. Footage from GHF shows chaotic scenes. Critics, including the UN, have questioned its neutrality, a charge the group denies. Israel's military says it's offering limited safe hours to access aid, but warns that outside that window, movement in that area could be deadly. The re-escalation follows Israel's renewed offensive against Hamas, ending a 2-month ceasefire back in March. Now we have Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, risk analyst, joining us live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for staying with us. With 16 Palestinians reportedly killed in fresh strikes, what assurances, if any, are in place to protect those civilians in densely populated zones like the Jabalia and Khan Yunis?
Israel's not going to give assurances. What Israel will say is that there are designated channels where people should queue up for the food, but also keeping in mind that this is still a combat zone. There are still ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hamas terrorists nearby to the food distribution centers. And that's one of the reasons why the UN and other critics have said that this whole arrangement is a bad idea. Be that as it may, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is distributing food. Civilians are lining up to access the food, but this occurs at the same time that there are hostilities nearby. So it's very dangerous for civilians, but that's the reality of a situation where Hamas does not want to agree to a ceasefire.
And evacuation orders were issued in northern Gaza from what we know. How realistic is relocation for residents with limited options under constant bombardment and nowhere to go?
That's true. It's very difficult for civilians to evacuate. They say, where are we supposed to go? I think from the Israeli side, what they're saying is, we're informing you of upcoming military action in certain sectors, and you need to leave those sectors, and you need to move south. And that's pretty much what Israel has been doing throughout the war ever since October of 2023. They give notice to civilians and say, you need to move. Now, civilians, of course, they'll say, but we've been moving and we're still attacked, or we move and then we get attacked to where we've moved to, which was supposed to be a safe location. But again, part of the onus is on Hamas, which is embedding itself with civilians, and that results in ongoing hostilities between the Israeli military and Hamas, very close by to where civilians are.
According to you, should groups accused of partiality be allowed to lead humanitarian aid in active war zones like GHF is doing in Gaza Strip?
That's a really good question, but the reality is, at least as of this moment, they're the only option available. They're the only organization on the ground that's willing to be there. The other organizations only want to be there when there's a ceasefire, but there's a ceasefire proposal on the table that Hamas does not want to accept. This is the U.S. brokered proposal for a 60-day ceasefire, including the release of hostages and the release from the Israeli side of Palestinian prisoners. It's Hamas that doesn't want to agree to that, and under those conditions, other humanitarian organizations are very reluctant to be on the ground. At the moment, it's only the GHF which is willing to be on the ground and provide food aid, and that's just the reality that all the stakeholders have to deal with.
And last but not least, the big question is, who is responsible for ensuring safe and orderly aid delivery when both distributors and recipients face gunfire?
Israel is certainly caught in a very difficult situation here. On the one hand, they have an obligation under international law to safeguard civilians and to feed civilians. On the other hand, they're in the middle of a war with Hamas terrorists. So, you know, they could not fight Hamas, but that's not really a realistic option. So hostilities are ongoing. At the same time, via the GHF, Israel is trying to facilitate aid, but they get criticized for doing that as well because people say that the GHF is not a neutral party, it's inexperienced, it's a flawed operation, the locations are not ideal for civilians. So Israel is really stuck. Whichever option they choose, they're going to get in trouble. But I'll tell you one thing that's not going to change as long as Netanyahu is the prime minister, and unless there's a ceasefire agreement, in the absence of which he's going to continue to fight, order his military to fight Hamas.
News. Russia says it killed a man attempting to launch a drone attack on a military site in the Ryazan region. The National Guard claims the suspect was carrying grenades and opened fire when confronted. This comes amid a wave of Ukrainian drone strikes, including a recent attack that damaged Russian nuclear-capable aircraft. Meanwhile, Moscow's mayor says air defenses shot down another drone targeting the capital. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.